Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the times out of your busy days and busy schedule to join myself, Brian Hyrick from VoIP Supply, Scott Farrell of Algo, and Ian Pitts of Syn-Apps. Today we'll be discussing unified emergency and mass notification software regarding IP paging, alerting, and intercom. Myself, I'm Brian Hyrick. I've been with VoIP Supply for 13 years now. So anything you need, we can have a one-on-one. Scott, if you go to the next slide, you will see that there is a question bubble in the lower right-hand corner. Please feel free to engage, ask questions. We would like to make this as engaging as possible and as interactive as possible. So we'll be sure to get to all of your questions by the end of the presentation. For those of you who do not know, since 2002, VoIP Supply has been working with resellers and end users. We have over 125,000 live customers that we do work with. VoIP Supply offers a rental program, our DAS program, or Device as a Service, which gives your customers the option to go from CapEx to OpEx for low monthly payments. We do offer provisioning on that hardware as well, so we can blind ship directly if you need your paging speakers provisioned and blind ship directly to your client to save you that operating expense. VoIP Supply can certainly do that for you. On the other side of things, VoIP Supply does have a marketplace as well. So anything from SIP trunks to hosted service, you can really build up your MRR and receive discounts that stack with hardware through VoIP Supply on our partners there. Again, please schedule a one-on-one with me, and I'll be reaching out directly to all the attendees today as well to introduce you to these programs. Along with provisioning, we do have fulfillment where you can see your real-time inventory, you can check progress on your orders, and you can see in real time if your order has been green-lighted, shipped, or what stage in the provisioning or order process that it is in. We also have a refresh and reclaim program. So if you're out on site and say, geez, maybe there's some old cyber data speakers and you want to upgrade and update and get some new Algo speakers, VoIP Supply can possibly offer you cash or store credit for those units. And the flip, we do have reconditioned units as well that we can offer you at a very compelling discount. Scott, if you'll go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Let's kick it over to you guys, and thank you for Scott and Ian for joining us today and taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us. Let's kick it off.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Hi, this is Scott Farrell, and I'm with Algo Communication Products. I'm a strategic accounts representative responsible for the North American market, and I'm going to be taking you through some of our portfolio, and we're going to talk about how the Algo portfolio is so tightly aligned and ties in with Syn-Apps. So we have Ian Pitts is the president and CEO of Syn-Apps, and he's going to be presenting with me today. So we'll be tag teaming and going back and forth. As Brian mentioned, there is a bubble where you can put in questions. So we do like the session to be interactive. If you have a question, put it in the bubble, and Haley or Brian will alert us to that, and then we can answer your questions as we go through this presentation. So Algo, is noticing a lot of change in the industry, and basically critical safety and security are a huge function that where we're seeing a lot of uptake. So in many verticals, critical safety and security, whether it be notifying people of an emergency event that's taking place within their environment, whether there is a weather event that's being tracked, you want to be able to quickly and clearly and concisely be able to communicate with an environment. And with Algo, we provide a full solution set of speakers, utilizing wideband codec, and you're going to see today, how critical safety and security can be addressed with our portfolio in conjunction with Syn-Apps. Ian has some really nice, compelling slides to take you through. So critical safety and security are driving a huge uptake in IP technology and mass notification. Another big driver that we're seeing in the industry that's causing change is just common infrastructure. People in in industry want to put in a standard network-based topology. They don't. IT departments don't want to be managing different types of plants. So we're seeing a lot of organizations that are standardizing on an RJ45 format. A lot of the product that is coming to market today that is being used in these environments is all IP enabled. So that is definitely a big driver. And then the other thing that we're seeing too is just being able to manage these environments over the network. So you'll see that the Syn-Apps dashboard is here. There's a web interface in all of the Algo communication products as well that allow for an end user to interact with them and be able to monitor and manage them over their network. So being able to remotely diagnose and manage environments is a huge driver as well. Legacy infrastructure is not easy to monitor and cannot report its status as IP devices can. And then, of course, there's a lot of push in the UC industry where everything is migrating over to IP and SIP-based communications. So the Syn-Apps platform is utilized with all of these brands that you see below, and the Algo product portfolio is certified with all these brands. So a lot of drive out there based on the new UC infrastructure, whether it be premise-based or hosted. So Ian's going to take you through, what is mass notification.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, good afternoon, everybody, or morning, depending on where you're at. Again, appreciate you spending a little time with us. I think it's important as we get into the webinar to make sure that we define some of these industry terms so we all understand kind of where each of these products play and what position we take on servicing some of the needs in these various spaces. So, according to NFPA 72, and I'm sure many of you already know, there are a lot of definitions around mass notification. And so one of the things that I think is important is we talk about emergency mass notification and on-premise mass notification and what that means from a jurisdiction and governance perspective. So according to NFPA 72, I'm going to go over just two of these. There's a lot of other derivatives here, but there are two that I think are important for us to understand. And that is on-premise wide area notification and emergency mass notification, and then also what's called distributed recipient mass notification. So these two scenarios are quite different. And in order to be certified and code compliant, anything that's going to be servicing your organizations for emergency mass notification, wide area notification, and on-premise notification, these are certifiable code compliant systems that have to be out there that are approved by what's called an AHJ, which is essentially the fire marshal. And so these typically are going to be things like fire panels that have audible alerting capabilities that can deliver intelligible audio. Also things like voice alarm systems and some others. So through our conversations today, I want to make sure that we're all aware that in building certified NFPA 72 compliant and code compliant systems require one of those devices to be in the environment certified by the fire marshal. So Scott and I will be talking about, augmenting these types of systems and allowing you to deliver audio notifications and other types of notifications further than just the fire alarm. But please remember that these things are required by law. So we augment those as what we call an ancillary notification platform. And then when we go into the second notification type, which is distributed mass notification, so this is something that Syn-Apps plays quite well in, and ultimately the difference is that in a distributed recipient mass notification environment, we are targeting an individual, so their mobile device, SMS, email, these types of things, their desktop computer, not targeting a large geographic area within a facility. So not saying, for example, the corridors down a hallway. Those would fall under the other wide area notification, on-premise notification portion. So while we provide both, it's just important to understand the differentiating pieces there and how we kind of fit into the overall puzzle. And so from a Syn-Apps and Algo perspective, what we're going to talk to you today about is how we can work in parallel with these types of systems to allow your customers or yourselves meet the overall notification needs you would like, whether they be for routine communications on a daily basis, or whether they be for emergency mass notification, from either a natural disaster or man-influenced situation that you feel a critical notification is required. So Revolution, looks like we've got a little T there. It's supposed to be Meet Revolution. It's like a little formatting, sorry about that. But the product we're going to be talking to you about today, in parallel to Algo's devices that Scott will cover, are the software components associated with these types of systems. And our offering is called Revolution. And Revolution, really, when we talk about this product, we talk about it under the premise of three core pillars. And those core pillars are going to be our ability to seamlessly integrate a variety of disparate systems in your infrastructure and beyond, as well as moving into providing you a very simple, easy to use communications platform that allows you to leverage all of those integrated systems. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is provide you a single platform that allows you to protect your people, property, and assets. And that's what Revolution is really built to service. It's built to do. It's meant to give you a comprehensive, simple, flexible console that allows you to manage, manipulate, and activate all of your notifications from one centralized location. So at a very high level, that's really what Revolution is intended to do. So this is ultimately, from a architecture standpoint and a platform side, this is a good representation of the various systems and capabilities that Revolution as a platform has. And when we layer on the Algo endpoints, it really gives us a comprehensive notification platform that allows organizations a single fabric to all of their notification needs, with very flexible opportunities to activate, meaning start a notification, whether it be a manual process by dialing a phone or an automated process from a weather alert, for example. We're going to go through some use cases here in a little bit, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time on this slide to make sure that we all understand exactly what Revolution is capable of and how Algo and a lot of these other systems fit into an organization's overall mass notification kind of requirement. So the idea is, and we tend to talk about this internally, is that anything in your infrastructure that can play, display, or do something should be incorporated into your notification platform. It's not always appropriate to use every one of these notification modalities, but having them at your disposal is very critical when you need them to be able to leverage every single communication channel in a given situation. And so that is the intention of Revolution, is to allow you to seamlessly integrate all of these types of devices and processes into this notification platform, allowing you that flexibility when a notification requirement arises. So on this slide, there's a white box to the left that says activation methods. And this is a pretty good high-level representation of the variety of ways that Revolution can start a notification. We're going to go through top left to right and go down the list. I'll skip through some of them, but in general, we'll go through the majority. So of course, from a UI perspective, Revolution is 100% managed and maintained through a responsive web interface. It's also important to note that Revolution, like your Algo endpoints, are going to be deployed on site. So we work very closely with the Algo endpoints. We'll talk about something called our Certified Endpoint Partner Program in a minute. But ultimately, our software would get installed either virtually or onto a physical application server in your infrastructure. Then you would deploy the Algo endpoints. And then we all work together to be able to provide you the notification needs that are required for that kind of installation and premise. Once you get that installed, you're going to do everything through this user interface. We have a mobile application for iOS and Android, so you can use this for activating notifications. Lots of ways to leverage this. So things like, if there's an active shooter scenario in a facility or an emergency lockdown or evacuation, you can trigger those types of notifications to be launched from your mobile device anywhere you are with the push of a button, and these are fully configurable by the user. We have the ability to integrate IP buttons or contact closures. So on some of the Algo devices, for example, there's inputs that you can wire buttons to. We can use those to trigger specific types of events. These are also things like panic buttons under desks or silent alarm buttons, a variety of things that you can use to kind of start that notification process. We also have a large number of automated integrations. So we integrate with the National Weather Service, FEMA, and then IPAWS. And so you can ultimately build kind of rule sets for your notification platform that say, here's my geographic area, here are weather events that I care about, and here are the ways that when we meet these thresholds for tornado, flash flood, tsunami, whatever it might be, If it's this level of concern and it's within my concern area, I want to automatically turn on all the Algo devices and start playing an alert so everybody in the infrastructure knows that this is happening. And you can do 1 or 1,000 of these types of events, depending on the type of organization. Maybe you're geographically dispersed in different areas of concern across the nation. So you can, build out these types of rule sets that make sense for you. Of course, as Scott pointed out earlier, we integrate with just about every IP PBX that's manufactured. So if it's a SIP compliant PBX, Revolution can integrate with that, allowing you to pick up any phone in your infrastructure to dial a specific phone number associated to these types of pre-canned notifications or live notifications as well. And then, as I mentioned earlier, around the local notification, mass notification, and distributed recipient notifications, we can integrate with the Fire panel to extend the reach of that emergency mass notification solution through all of the devices that we see on the right here. So really, the idea is that this fire alarm goes off, Revolution receives a signal from that panel, and then we can then start a pre-configured notification plan that your organization would use to make sure all of those that are in need of being notified are notified in a timely manner with relevant information that they can react upon to hopefully influence a more positive outcome to whatever that situation might be. We do have a full scheduling system in Revolution as well. So, we're not just here to handle those emergencies that you hope never happen. We're also here to handle your routine communications. So if you have education institutions that you're servicing, things like school bells, period dismissals, lunch breaks, even if you're in manufacturing, we have some of the largest manufacturing plants, automotive plants in North America, using Revolution, allowing them to do things like shift breaks and break times and dismissals and other types of notifications within their infrastructures. So really the idea is that anything that has to happen on a predetermined schedule, you can use the scheduling tool for, as well as things like retail, right? Doing in-store announcements on a periodic basis. I mentioned the iPause integrations earlier. This again is ways that you can then start to trigger notifications based on environmental events. And then we also are fully compliant with CAP, which is Common Alerting Protocol, both on the activation side, meaning coming into Revolution, and then outgoing from Revolution to activate other on-premise systems or off-premise systems. That's important. That's not a very common thing for people to be both inbound and outbound CAP compliant, and Revolution allows you to do that. And you can use this for integration with things like digital signage, emergency alert encoders to be able to do CCTV overrides and some other things along those lines. And then we also have the ability to integrate with a variety of collaboration tools. So for example, Microsoft Teams and Slack. We can also receive webhooks inbound. So think about if you're in your Microsoft Teams client and you recognize that there's an emergency, you can just type at our bot, and our bot will automatically activate the notification that you ask right from within Teams, so you don't have to leave whatever that common collaboration tool is. And we can also do things like a little bit more standard, right? Like activating based on an email. If we receive audio from, let's say, a radio station or a radio base station, so maybe there's an emergency channel that Revolution is monitoring, we can then automatically receive that audio stream and then kick off a notification event to deliver that out to the IP speakers, the desktops, or any of the like. And then for supported environments, not only do we do all the notification functionality, but we will also monitor your environment for 911. So if somebody internally has dialed 911, Revolution can identify that that's happened and then be able to kick off an internal notification process that allows your first responders in building to know that this happened, and maybe your ingress egress locations to know that Ian Pitts on floor 5, room 10, just dialed 911. So when your first responders show up at your door, you'll know where to route them. It's important to note that we do not get involved in any kind of E911 solution, and we don't integrate with the PSAP. So this is really meant to internally notify your folks so you can have a rapid response with any resources you might have internally. And then, as Scott alluded to earlier, one of the real, kind of powerful portions of transitioning over to IP communication is obviously the ability for us to have each speaker as an individually addressable device, but also we can have a status monitoring of each of these devices. So basically, we have the ability to supervise every IP device on the network. And that's one of the really powerful pieces about integrating the Algo devices into the Revolution platform, is that we can proactively notify you that one of these devices might have fallen off, And so if a device, we haven't heard from it for a period of time, we have our status activator that will automatically send you a proactive notification that says this device is no longer there. So it's again very robust and gives you all the enterprise kind of requirements that you would think about deploying large scale notification solutions like this. And then as we look to the right side of this slide, I'm going to kind of round the circle fairly quickly so we can get into some of the other slides. But this is a good kind of cross section of the devices that Revolution allows you to take control of. And when I say take control, it's really important to think about when you have a variety of disparate communication systems in your infrastructure, having one system orchestrate the communications to all of them becomes very critical, because you have routine communications that might happen in your enterprise and your organization on a daily basis. So think about a school, for example, where you might be doing a morning announcement, but then we might have a lockdown scenario or evacuation scenario, and we would want to preempt that notification that would be considered not critical. And if you're communicating with each of these systems independently, it's very hard for us to override that. And we've got some slides that Scott will talk through later that illustrate this in a fairly a deep way. But having Revolution take control of all of these downstream systems allows us ultimately to determine, based on your configuration, what notifications have what priority, so we can take down non-critical notifications when we have a critical notification that needs to be played. And so all the devices that you're looking at on the screen, when integrated with Revolution, we have that capability to override the normal operations of those things. So obviously we have full integration with the Algo IP speaker portfolio. We have integrations with Teams and Slack, as well as WebEx Teams via our webhook notifier, which is a little bit further down. All of the call button devices that Algo offers into the market, and really any SIP compliant device can be integrated directly with Revolution as well. On that previous slide, you saw a number of PBX icons that Scott had displayed. Really, if there's any IP speaker or IP phone out there, we can integrate with them. Most commonly, for brands that aren't specifically integrated, we can do multicast notifications to those devices. But devices that we have deep integrations with, Cisco, Avaya, ShoreTel, Mitel, Polycom, we actually will take over the audible portions of the device as well as the visual displays of those devices, allowing you to both communicate audibly and visually. And in most cases, actually have soliciting responses from those recipients of those notifications on those IP phones as well. And then you'll see an IP strobe from Algo. Again, one of the critical components of a really well orchestrated and designed notification platform is making sure that we're dealing with ADA compliance. And so having the ability to drive visual notifications in addition to audible notifications is a critical component to meet that need. And we can override CCTV systems. I also mentioned mobile in the activation side. We have a full complement of mobile notification capabilities for both iOS and Android. These are rich communications. What we try to do with Revolution is give you a consistent notification across every modality. So the images, the audio, the text that you're receiving will all be the same across any one of these notification methodologies. So that way the user has a very similar experience regardless of where they're receiving that. It's important to note that there are 3 types of devices that we can solicit responses from. So the IP phone itself, the mobile client, and then the desktop clients, these 3 devices are items that we can send unique requests for a response to, and then allow the users that are receiving those notifications to actually indicate from those devices, the response. So for example, if we were to go into a shelter in place, we could say everybody's accounted for from each device. That's a good example of something like that. And then from an outdoor notification perspective, obviously we have the Algo horns. We've done a number of large deployments of these horns in various types of scenarios with Algo, and we've had very, very good success with them. Really well-engineered product that meets the need for a lot of our customers as they go outside of the facilities. And then we'll go through the last couple here fairly rapidly. We have, of course, our desktop client, which is something that gives us the ability to extend the notification to to Apple and Windows platforms. A webhook notifier. So, we continuously improve our product. We have a release on a quarterly basis. So 4 major releases of our product on an annual basis. And those are typically bringing in, reasonably good size feature functionality enhancements. And of course, obviously bug fixes that we've identified in the field. But the webhook notifier is a good tool that allows you as a partner and as ultimately as an end user the ability to integrate things that maybe we haven't already done natively. So this is a very standardized way for you to reach out to other platforms and activate them as we start up a notification process. We also, through integration with our paging relay and some of the Algo devices, have the ability to integrate your VHF or UHF radio systems on top of this. So hopefully, as I'm going around this, you can kind of start to see a theme of Revolution reaching out to all of these physical devices that you might have in your infrastructure and allowing them to receive the exact same notification at the exact same time and making sure it's intelligible across the entire enterprise. And that's really the power of Revolution, and it's the power of good partnerships like Syn-Apps and Algo, where we have deep integrations that not only allow you to quickly deploy and manage these systems, but you can rely upon them to deliver the critical notifications that your enterprise might need. And then we have a lot of the other traditional stuff, right? Digital signage integration, SMS, and email notifications. And then Scott will go over some specific slides around how we would integrate with some analog platforms that maybe previously have deployed in your enterprise. We tend to try to allow our customers to leverage every asset they've already purchased. And oftentimes it doesn't make sense to completely displace something when it's doing the job that you originally put it in place to do. So that's one of the things that between Algo and Syn-Apps we allow you to do is leverage some of these analog paging systems that might have already been deployed. So you can then spend dollars on enhancing or improving notifications in areas that you don't have coverage. So hopefully that gives you a pretty good high-level overview of Revolution and what it's capable of doing, both from an activation perspective and a delivery of notification to various modalities. So we're going to move on to the next slide at this point. And if there are any questions, again, I'll remind you that you're welcome to put those in the little bubble at the bottom. And Scott and I will do our best to answer those for you as we're going through this conversation. So I'm going to address the left side of this slide, and then Scott's going to address the right side. So when we look at this slide, I mentioned in my previous slides something called our Certified Endpoint Partner Program. And so Syn-Apps and Algo entered into an agreement where Algo leverages our intellectual property, and they actually embed that into the Algo IP speakers and devices. And so what that means to you as a partner or an end user is that each of these devices will behave exactly the same way, regardless of the type of device. And some of the very specific things are that if you go to deploy these at scale, there is a zero configuration requirement on all of these devices. You simply plug them into the network. We use an option in your DHCP or the customer's DHCP settings that tell each of these devices that Revolution has been installed. And when the devices come online, they get an IP address. They also get that DHCP option, and therefore they automatically register with Revolution. So you have zero requirement to go into the user interface to do anything from a configuration perspective on any of these devices. Everything will be done through the Revolution user interface. So it really streamlines that deployment, and it also streamlines any kind of break-fix scenario that you might encounter out in the field, right? As mentioned earlier, one of the issues, especially if you're doing kind of UCaaS or telephony as a service, maybe you're not even going to go to the customer's facility and therefore won't have the ability to configure these devices. The nice thing about Revolution is you don't have to. You can just simply ship them to the customer, have them plug them in, and they will automatically be part of that notification environment. So the 4 devices on the left are the ones that are currently supported under our Certified Endpoint Partner Program. Algo is working hard to enhance a number of their other devices. I believe the strobe lights are the next device in line to be able to fall into our IP device API. And I also think the 8190 clock speaker is already or will be done certified soon. So the idea is that we're going to continue to enhance that product portfolio, and you'll see more and more cooperation between Syn-Apps and Algo with various devices in the future. Scott, do you want to talk a little bit about the devices on the right here?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ian. That was a great overview. So we are seeing a lot of development on our side. The 8190 is a fairly new speaker that was introduced about a year and a half ago. And you'll notice the 8128, that was our legacy, white LED strobe light. We've since come out with a multicolored 8138. So as Ian mentioned, we're continuing to develop our firmware, and more of the portfolio will have the embedded API to be able to seamlessly integrate with that DHCP option. But in the meantime, the nice thing about the Algo portfolio is and I'll get into a little more detail on some of the features that are embedded within the endpoints. But all of these endpoints are basically running an operating system, a Linux operating system. They have a SIP stack in them, so they can proxy to a SIP server, and they can actually proxy, and we're going to see a little more about that, but they can proxy to Syn-Apps. So there's some interesting ways that the devices can be configured and be manipulated, and also, there's a cost savings for you in that you don't necessarily need to SIP register a device. We can leverage Syn-Apps to be able to set up and tear down a call, for instance, to these devices. So the devices on the right, as you know, we do make speakers, and the speakers do all have the API in them, the legacy ones that we had, and our new ones we're working towards. We have the strobe light portfolio, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this Algo 8301 paging adapter, because that's an interesting device to interface into analog technology and preserve it, and we'll show you quite a simplified way of doing that. And of course, we make the SIP Intercoms, which we'll be touching on a little more as well. So from a vertical perspective, Algo and Syn-Apps, we're embedded and operate in all of these verticals. And when you look at education, I would say education is our fastest growing vertical. Healthcare, manufacturing, transportation, logistics, retail, hospitality, all of them, we're well embedded in. With the world we live in today, with this pandemic, there's all kinds of new use cases where there's controlled access required going into retail spaces, hospitality spaces, and we're seeing more and more use cases coming out where you'll be able to leverage a Syn-Apps instance with Algo devices to be able to provide communication to people that are entering and exiting businesses. Today, you'll notice that that's all manually done with people at the door. We'll be able to automate all of that. So there's a lot of interesting use cases that are coming to fruition. And what's another thing to recognize about, and I think you've seen that, by looking at Ian's previous slide, Algo, we don't have any common equipment. There is no software running on your network. There's no there's no server, there's no common equipment. So basically, think of us as a building block, and then you're going to manipulate us using Syn-Apps and other means to be able to trigger workflows and events in your environment. But again, all the verticals that you can imagine that have public address emergency notification requirements, it's a great fit to put this solution in play. So as I mentioned, the IP portfolio of speakers, they're basically, plug and play integration with Syn-Apps. And what are they facilitating, right? They're facilitating, paging, loud ringing. The fact that these are IP devices, we're not limited. So we can scale into the hundreds and thousands of devices. Ian mentioned that we've done some very, very large deployments with the 8186 horn speaker. So we literally have thousands of these 8186s that are on subnets that are being controlled by Syn-Apps. It's a seismic project, I believe, Ian, that you were referring to, the large one, but you're using the 8186.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, it's a really interesting use case, and if we have time, we should talk a little more about it. It's very interesting what Ian's done there. The page zones. So, we are just an endpoint that's being, controlled, and we're receiving multicast messages from Syn-Apps. But we have up to 50 multicast zones that are embedded within each of our endpoints. We also support the wideband codec. All of our devices don't require power, like a local power. They get their power from the network. They're all PoE 802.3AF, so they're PoE devices. So there's no mains power required. Another really nice feature set within our speakers is the ambient noise capability that we have. So all of the speakers that are manufactured by Algo have an embedded microphone, and you can enable that microphone to listen to noise in an environment. So unlike many legacy systems where it would get the volume would be set via a tap, it would be tapped at the worst case scenario typically. So if you go into an environment when it's quiet, like a warehouse in the morning, they haven't started the forklifts or the machinery, and a page went off, it could be quite annoying and loud. We don't do that. With our speakers, we basically set the volume to be nominal, and in that quiet environment. And as noise is introduced to the environment, the microphone picks that up and we self-amplify to address that. The other thing that the embedded microphone facilitates is two-way communication. So the device can be called, it can auto-answer and set up a two-way talkback path. We have audio memory for WAV files, so we can have WAV files that are stored on our speakers and our adapters, and those WAV files can be triggered by Syn-Apps or by other inputs. So what we're showing here is that, you know, with the two systems, like the two solutions, can be tied together to address any type of workflow. There's a web interface to manage any of our devices. So if you needed to go in to turn on a feature, you know, you wanted to basically be able to adjust the volume manually, you can log into the device and do that. The other thing too is our devices support, you know, encrypted communication. So TLS and CIFS, SRTP, these security features are embedded within our firmware. So
yeah, it's got a couple of
that's
points that I wanted to bring up really quick as well to enhance some of this. So as Scott mentioned, you know, from a scalability perspective, the Algo devices support up to 50 multicast addresses natively in the boxes. And one of the things in combination with Revolution, there's no limit to the number of unique groupings you can do when using Revolution, because the way that the APIs integrate with the Algo devices is you don't actually have to configure those static multicast environments. We actually instruct the device to listen to streams that are generated by our platform. However, one of the things that's very valuable is having you know, multiple layers of redundancy in your notification strategy. And by configuring some of these features in tandem, meaning that you would normally operate the environment using Revolution, but if should Revolution go down, if you have multiple servers, have a catastrophic environment issue, maybe it's centrally located and the WAN's down, you can configure all of the voice routing to be able to use the embedded functionality of the Algo devices as a backup site option. So for example, if you needed to do a live page and normally you dial extension 1000, that would get routed to Revolution. But if Revolution's unavailable, it can get routed to an Algo device via SIP and then have that leverage one of those pre-configured, you know, 50 notification zones that is as a backup. So it really gives you as a partner and as a customer, you know, multiple layers of redundancy as you're looking to deploy these things for critical notification.
So the next speaker we have here is the 8190. So this is a fairly new speaker that, as I mentioned, it's a surface mount speaker. It was designed specifically for the education space, so it has a high visibility clock, white on black for contrast. It has optional strobe lights available to it. It has an integrated call button. Again, it's a PoE device, but this one is PoE plus. In that there's a little more horsepower required to drive it. You'll notice because it's surface mounted and we wanted to give you the best experience, it has a line array of speakers in it. So there's 4 speakers in this unit. So when it's surface mounted, what we're doing is we're controlling the sound dispersion, and we're basically pushing that sound horizontally across the room. So somebody that would be sitting fairly close to the speaker, somebody that's sitting on the other side of a classroom, for instance, will have a very similar experience. It too has the embedded microphone, and it has that integrated backlit button that can initiate a call. But it can basically, and this one will be getting the API where it'll be able to receive all of its communications and interactions. So Ian had mentioned the bell scheduling. So when the bells are triggered and it sends out a multicast event today, that'll play out on this. But you will also have full control of this device eventually through Revolution. This slide just depicts that ambient noise capability. So what I'm showing in this slide here is it's fairly quiet. We're going to set that speaker to that quiet nominal value, and we're just going to monitor that environment. And as noise gets introduced, we'll self-amplify. So it just depicts that, and that's available on all of our speakers that are deployed in as part of the portfolio. So Ian had mentioned, legacy infrastructure, and we want to be able to allow people to leverage that. So what you're seeing here is a typical deployment of an analog paging system into a UC environment. And what was done in the past, and still done very commonly today, is an analog terminal adapter is put in place. So the ATA, as it's known, would SIP register back into the UC infrastructure, and somebody would call that analog terminal adapter, and then you're going to have all that legacy equipment, like the telephone answering module. it's still going to remain in place. So you're basically doing IP to an analog type conversion. When you introduce an algo product, we don't need to do that. We simplify that environment. So in this previous slide, where I'm showing that there's an ATA with legacy equipment being required, that functionality is embedded within our device. So basically, we are a pure SIP registration. And in this picture, we're proxying to Revolution, and Revolution is going to be able to set up a call, direct a call to our device. But you'll notice that the answering module is gone because we provide a balance line out, right, 600 ohm balance line input right into that amplifier. So we don't need any of that legacy equipment that was in place with an ATA. So you'd have the answering module, a feedback eliminator, a scheduled announcement server, all these different things that existed in the legacy world, all these boxes that would be on that shelf are now gone because all of that functionality is embedded within Revolution and the paging adapter. And it's very important to note that there's no conversion. ATAs, they only provide a wideband, or they only provide a narrowband connection, whereas we provide a G722 wideband connection from our device as an output. And again, the device SIP registers, no common equipment, and we can control and preserve that asset. And because we support multicast on the devices, we can then deploy and augment the environment with IP and tie all that together. So you could have a customer that has a warehouse, have an existing paging system, or a retailer with an existing paging system, and then they do an expansion. They don't have to expand that old technology. We can start augmenting the environment with IP, and we can tie that together. And for those that are wanting to migrate away from analog technology, because we support multicast on the Algo 8301, we support multicast on our other speakers, and we can build that hybrid system, you can basically do a phased migration. We're doing a project with a large airport right now who have over 3,000 analog speakers and 150 amplifiers deployed. And as they're doing the major renovation in that airport, they're basically removing all of their legacy infrastructure and putting in IP infrastructure because they want to be able to monitor and manage everything over the network. So it's a great strategy that we can do here, and leveraging Revolution, we can just build out any type of use case that we like. So the notifications that would be triggered would hit our device and then be played out on that legacy infrastructure. In a legacy world, if you wanted to put in a single speaker, a lot of service businesses, think of a garage where they have a front office and then they have the bays in the back, and they want to be able to just put a speaker in there because they need to effectively communicate and play page announcements to the workers in the back. In the legacy world, you'd have to put in some common infrastructure. There have to be an amplifier in place and so on and so forth. With IP, all you need is a speaker. You need one speaker, a PoE drop, and then a proxy, which in this case, in this example, I'm showing that I'm proxy to Revolution. So there's no SIP registration required. There's no licensing required. I proxy to Revolution. Somebody needs to make a call. They pick up a phone. They call that broadcast extension in Revolution. It terminates. It sets up the call to my speaker, terminates the path, and you're paging. It's as simple as that. So it removes a lot of complexity. Everything is embedded within the endpoint. So Ian, I think you were going to talk a little more about your SIP notifying capabilities and the native
yeah, absolutely.
tie-ins with yeah.
Yep, thanks, Scott. So as Scott pointed out in the previous slides, once you integrate the Algo devices into Revolution via our API, which ultimately means that it's plugged into the network and then automatically discovered Revolution and ready to be notified. Everything else from that point forward is going to be managed within Revolution. So essentially what you do is go into our user interface. You're going to select the type of notification, whether it be intercom, pre-recorded, store and forward. Do you want an opening tone? Do you want a closing tone? We'll manage all the audio libraries, everything involved. But in addition to that, we can natively integrate with all these disparate notification ways. So as we've got depicted here on the slide, some of the items in green, these are the native integrations with Revolution, meaning that these devices have our API embedded. And so essentially what our API does is once the Algo device registers with us, it's sitting there waiting for commands from Revolution. And once a notification gets activated in Revolution, Revolution will send a specific command to each of the individual devices telling them, hey, we have a notification. you're part of it, turn on and listen to this IP address, whether it be unicast, multicast, and then we'll start to stream the content to those devices as appropriate. At the same time, what's depicted here on blue is that we're going to actually reach out to each of these 8301s, and today this is going to be done via SIP. As Scott mentioned, in the future, these devices will also have the API built into them, so we would do this in the same way we do the items in green. But ultimately, we're going to reach out and make a SIP call directly to each of these devices over the internal infrastructure. And then once they've answered, we are going to then add them into that notification. It's important to understand that from a Syn-Apps perspective, we've been doing this almost 20 years. So synchronizing the audio across all these disparate communication channels is really a critical component to having intelligible audio out in the field. So Revolution is smart enough to know that we're calling some devices, we're using our API to talk to some other devices. We might have some devices on the other side of a wide area network. And so what we'll do is we'll actually wait and give you some control over once we get X number of these devices ready in a listening state, then we will start to transmit the audio across all of these notification channels. So that way, if you have an analog speaker that's sitting next to an IP speaker, you don't have stadium effect or have an echo or delay. That's one of the things that Revolution does very, very well. I think it's also important to note that any of these devices, because they're going to be integrated with Revolution, should one of them fall offline, maybe we had a power outage, we had a switch go down, we had cable get cut. Revolution, by default, each of these devices checks in with us every 60 seconds, and that's configurable by the end user. And if we have missed check-ins, you can set a threshold that says, if I haven't heard from these devices, in 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, to automatically send you a notification so you're aware that there's a problem, you can proactively go out and fix it. That's one of the things that's, again, because it's SIP or an IP, we have that capability to effectively, supervise all of these devices regardless of how they're plugged in. And that's not something you could normally do, with the downstream amplifier. And Scott, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think some of the, like the 8301s, they even have the ability to measure the impedance going out of those devices, so you can, potentially detect downstream outages as well.
We are capable of doing that. Yes.
Yeah. So now you're, really taking some analog services that you had limited visibility into through the Algo devices, adding some layers of management, and then ultimately driving all the way up into Revolution so we can proactively notify you. So very, very effective ways to manage that. And this is all possible by a tight collaboration between, Algo and Syn-Apps, making sure that that their devices are leveraging our IP device API. And what happens is once they've certified a device internally, they actually send it to us for interoperability testing. And then we will run that through our interoperability labs to make sure that the device behaves as expected, fully adheres to the API specifications. And therefore, we can collaboratively guarantee to you as a customer or partner that when this device gets installed, it's going to do exactly what it's supposed to do to make sure that it serves the needs of your customers. So then you can go to the next slide, Scott.
Yeah, so this slide, I'm just, what we're doing is we're continuing, so for ease of management of our devices that are out in the field, we've basically upgrading all of our processing power in our devices. So we've come out with the 8128 G2. So it's running the same common firmware across our entire portfolio. So it's just easier for management going forward, in that we're going to have a single stream of development software for all of our endpoints, and that's what we're migrating towards. So the new 8128 G2 with the updated processor, it's more powerful, it's brighter, it can support the TLS and SIP-S for secured encrypted communications. It also supports mutual authentication. The 8138, as I mentioned earlier as well, is our new multicolored strobe light. So it's equipped with red, blue, amber, and green. And again, you can trigger all kinds of different workflows leveraging Syn-Apps to, for instance, a way of finding. We can flash strobe lights red. Basically, don't go to that area while it's playing, and then Syn-Apps can be broadcasting a message, go towards the green strobes, and then basically flash those strobes. So you can do all kinds of different interesting things now with this, with these multicolored devices. So we still sell the 8128 as a white LED light, and you can order the lens covers for those of you that have that deployed in your strategy. But moving forward, you can also migrate over to the 8138. And again, these are going to have the API on them. I know that's what design was working on, and I believe they're at the point where they are going to your interop lab next, Ian, for that interoperability testing.
Great. Yeah, that's really nice because correct me if I'm wrong on the 8138. That's all those color variations are embedded into the single device, so you no longer have to worry about lenses. So you can have a multi-purpose device in one, right?
That is correct. Yeah. So we can.
Yeah, that's great.
So multiple flash patterns, multiple colors, multiple combinations of colors, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So there's yeah, you can build out quite an interesting strategy with that single entity. And on the 8190S that I was talking about, the classroom speaker, if you put the optional strobe lights on that one, it too is red, green, blue, and amber.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That'll be a great addition for the customer portfolio.
Yeah. The other thing I just wanted to touch on is we are a manufacturer of intercoms. So for those of you that would have had a Nortel background, the two on the left are audio only devices. There's the 8201 and the 8028. So the 8201 is a SIP PoE device. So Algo in its past was an OEM manufacturer. So we used to manufacture the North Star door phone and the BCM door phones. There's literally hundreds of thousands of them out there. So that 8201 is a direct SIP replacement for that installed base. The one in the middle, the 8028, that has the two-part box, so it looks like a paging adapter. That's a control box for the 8028. That's our most popular one, and why it's so popular is we allow that box to be SIP registered. It has normally open, normally closed controls built into it. But for those of you that have legacy intercoms in place that are on a single pair connected to a digital or analog circuit, possibly that are far away from your, because in the digital world you could run a digital connection up to 1,000 feet away from your PBX with no issue. We allow you to do a single pair connection to that door station up to 1,000 feet away. So that's a nice two-piece solution, easy to implement. So you can have your SIP registration of the device. Somebody can push the call button, initiate a call. They can press a digit over the established circuit and release a door or a gate. The other two that we've manufactured on the right is the 8039 is the slim gray unit. That's a video-enabled unit. The reason we've designed it in that form factor is a lot of the new buildings have a glass frontage, so it's designed to mount on the mullion. It too is a PoE device, has normally open, normally closed capabilities in it. It basically, if you have a device that will support H.264 video, you can display video on the phone, but it also supports web video. So in the event that you don't have, if your platform doesn't support video, you could bookmark the IP address of the device. So you could be talking to the person, and you could bring up a bookmark, and you could bring the video onto your desktop that way. So it's quite a nice device. It has an embedded attendant. It can be customized with access codes for releasing the door. And the last one on the right, that's our multimedia. That's the 8036 SIP multimedia intercom. So that's a graphic touch display. It can be customized with directories. It's intended for unattended lobbies. So if you wanted to have that, a lot of schools, it's very popular with them. You can walk up and it can be push here. It brings up a directory. You can reach the custodian, the principal, the office. The other thing is this too supports web video. And for normally open, normally closed control of the door, we pair this with another device called the Algo 8061. But that I just wanted to touch on the portfolio that we have here of intercoms for a secure door. So what we're going to talk about now, Ian's going to just take you through kind of this full use case with mass notification, and this is a typical use case right here. But,
yeah, sure, great. And maybe what we'll do, Scott, is talk a little bit about you'd mentioned earlier the seismic use case, so we can kind of talk about both of those here together. So
sure.
Ultimately, these last two slides really just try to wrap up what we've talked about during the overall webinar. And as an interesting use case, mass notification allows you to do things like severe weather, adverse weather, to inform folks of situations happening quickly. So the specific scenario that Scott was mentioning earlier is a seismic event notification solution that we put together with Algo, where we have a large customer that's covering a large geographic space. It's actually a sizable portion of the country, and they have a number of Algo IP speakers deployed on poles throughout the geographic location to notify the inhabitants of the city should an earthquake happen. So from a Revolution standpoint, Revolution integrates to their seismic detection systems. And then upon any seismic event reaching a specific trigger level, that automatically will activate Revolution via our API. And then Revolution in turn plays a pre-can notification to all the inhabitants of that city to make sure that they're quickly informed, so they can obviously seek shelter and get to a place where they will be less impacted by the earthquake that's going to be onset. So that's just a really good kind of scenario where we've integrated with IoT sensors. We've driven that workflow through Revolution and embraced an open ecosystem and our partnership with Algo to be able to deliver these types of notifications. In that same scenario, we have a number of other kind of use cases where we can enable direct notifications to those poles. So really leveraging the various types of integrations that we have. So if there's something specifically that's noticed in one location, we can have two-way notification to that device to interact with the inhabitants of the city. We also have lots of other use cases around things like flash floods, severe weather, where traditionally, let's stick with the school, the education vertical that Scott was talking about earlier. A lot of school districts, what they're doing today is still having somebody listen to an old school weather radio, and when that weather radio makes the kind of warble tone, they pay attention. And should that impact them, then somebody has to manually start a process. That's something that we can absolutely automate between Revolution and the devices and the weather services, to be able to allow our customers to put in, as I mentioned earlier, the criteria that's meaningful to them. So if I live in an area that's prone to flooding, maybe I can put in a flash flood warning, have it alert me in various levels of urgency. And then as determined by my protocol, say when it gets to this threshold, I want it to automatically turn on every device, turn on the strobe lights, activate the mobile clients, the desktop clients, start making outbound phone calls. All of these things are possible with Revolution and Algo together. So I think you can probably look at a variety of use cases that your customers might have, or yourself. You might have yourself, and then talk to Scott, myself, or anybody at VoIP Supply, and we'd be happy to kind of walk you through how these joint solutions can solve those problems. And I think we have one last slide here, Scott, that I'll kind of wrap up, and then if there are any questions and answers, we can probably get into that, or if there's anything else that you have that you'd like to address, we can do as well. So hopefully this last 58 minutes that you spent with us has been informative. Just in recap, really Algo and Syn-Apps work very strongly together to be able to provide you a very capable, comprehensive, fault-tolerant, resilient notification solution for every type of notification need, whether it be on-premise daily communication, all the way through emergency evacuation, life, kind of impacting situations, as well as automated weather notifications, and again, routine daily communication. Together, we absolutely can solve and service the needs of yourselves and your customers. And we look forward to exploring any opportunities you might have down the road that you feel would be a good fit for Algo Syn-Apps. And obviously, not every solution needs both Algo and Syn-Apps. So we're also willing and capable of having conversations with you about very specific needs that we can do individually. But we work very, very well together and look forward to an opportunity to discuss any of those things that you might come across in the future. I'll hand it back to you, Scott, for any closing argument or closing statements, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I'm seeing more and more demand for integrating, and as I said, we're a building block, and we're just a part of that puzzle. So this slide, I find really sums it up well, and that the Algo endpoints, become part of that solution. But all these other disparate systems can be tied together and managed, and it just simplifies everything. And the fact that it's all on the network, it can be monitored. It's just a great solution. So we're really happy to have that partnership.
Absolutely, and I'll chime in here as well. Ian, Scott, Brian Hyrick, again, to everyone who maybe joined in a little later from VoIP Supply. But Ian, Scott, thank you so much for taking the time and bringing the solution together through both of your companies for everybody today. And one of the questions we do have, and I know we mentioned a couple of use case scenarios, but what is the most common scenario for mass notifications that you guys are seeing now, maybe during these interesting times we live in?
Yeah, so, well, I mean, from my perspective and the verticals that I've worked in, weather events is a big one. And shelter-in-place and lockdown in the education space is the other. So that's where I do see quite a bit of it. In the transportation industry, airports, mass notification is very important there, and it's used in different terms, right? So, as Ian was touching on earlier, what is the emergency, his system can quickly, identify whether it's a fire, is it an active shooter, and then he's going to trigger that event. But for me, I would say, education is probably the biggest one, and what's driving that too are these weather events are huge. The weather's getting worse and worse and worse, more intense.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Scott's summation of the various items. I think that we're starting to also see a pretty interesting uptick in automated detection of things like aggression, glass break, active shot detection. These types of technologies really are starting to allow us to become more proactive in solving problems. Even on video analytics, where we're doing, gun detection, not from an audible perspective, but from a visual, and things like loitering and other things that are precursors to problems. I see that these are starting to become more and more top of mind for lots of our customers that are required to, manage customer-facing environments where they might have, a few people that have high risk or a large number of people that ultimately they're charged with protecting. So on top of the various things that Scott's mentioned, I think those are things that we're starting to see more and more. And then one of the other large pieces for us is that it's really getting into things like smart city, like the seismic detection that we talked about previously. So it's not just about these unique situations that we hope never happen. It's really about how can we leverage the things that we've deployed to do more for us, ultimately allowing us to do more for those that we're charged to serve. And so we're seeing that IoT integration really starting, and has been for some time, but really starting to get some legs and allowing the notification event cycle to happen based on something detected is really becoming more and more popular.
Very good. Excellent. Well, gentlemen, do you have anything else you would like to add?
No, I'm good, Brian. Thanks for setting this up.
Yeah,
and everyone, thank you so much
time.
for absolutely, and thank you everyone for taking the time out of your busy day and busy schedules to spend a little bit of time to learn about mass notifications through Syn-Apps, Algo, and VoIP Supply. Feel free to reach out to myself, Brian Hyrick, with any questions and or concerns that you may have, and I will be happy. I'll be reaching out for one-on-ones with you as well to address your specific needs. But that will conclude today's webinar. Really appreciate everyone's time, and thank you so much.